Hello friends, and welcome to Figure Study, where we are appreciating the form in unofficial third-party add-on kits for Transformers. And today, at long last, we're going to be taking a look at the Transform Dreamwave upgrade kit for Power of the Primes Volcanicus. As a quick refresher, because I just can't be bothered to transform this thing back and forth multiple times, because I'm lazy, here is what Volcanicus looks like by default, which is not great. And then here is what Volcanicus looks like with a bit of fan moding, which definitely looks better in my opinion. And getting back to present day, here is Volcanicus with the Transform Dreamwave upgrade kit on, and yeah. Now you might be wondering why I'm starting in combined mode first rather than doing the typical thing of starting in either the Dino or Robot modes, showing it off there, and then finishing with the combined mode. It's two reasons mainly. One, because I love how it looks in combined mode and hate how this works in the Robot and Dino modes. More on that later. And two, because this is why everyone's going to buy this kit. It might be presumptuous of me to say that, but I highly doubt anyone's buying the Transform Dreamwave upgrade kit for Volcanicus in order to use it as accessories for the individual Dinobots. With the exception of possibly the weaponry that's included, but really, you could just get the non-F Dinobot weapons set, which is so much cheaper and does not come with all this extra nonsense. So yeah, I feel like this is really what everyone's here to see, so we're just going to open with this, and if you all are curious to see how it works out with the individual modes afterwards, then we can, stick around. Yes, there are some issues with this, which I will get into, but this overall looks amazing. It really does. The way this bulks out the torso, well, the torso and the waist and the thighs, the larger feet, which, there we go. The larger feet, which definitely work for a combiner like this. The more articulation on the hands. It all just comes together so well. And it's also much more stable. Like, the fan moding that I was showing off in the previous video for this guy, it got the job done, but it wasn't super stable. Like, it overall was okay. Especially using Slash to kind of hold everything together in the back there. But it was still one of those things that, if you jostle it the wrong way, it could fall apart pretty easily. This is not going anywhere. You have to deliberately and meticulously take this thing apart to get it out of this mode. I should also mention I have done some mild fan moding, I guess, to the individual limbs. Also, I don't have them in the default position, because Sludge is ordinarily supposed to be down there, Slug is supposed to be up there, but this is how I liked the configuration with, when I was doing just the fan moding, and it's kind of how I wanted to keep it. And so it's how I'm keeping it. Plus, there's the fact that if you've watched Emgo's video on this, you know that there are some issues with the legs when it comes to how you can position things sometimes because of the fact that you have to have Grimlock's legs turned around, and the little tail bits at the end there can get in the way. Hence why Slug's head is pointed forward as opposed to up. And also why Snarl's tail is not pegged together like it is in the fan mode pictures that I have, because there's just no room for it. It can't happen. But again, I think it looks fine. What's going on there with the knees? Totally fine. Doesn't bother me at all. Yes, the original default mode for Volcanicus has his shoulders too low, and if you want to get technical, this has his shoulders too high. But, for one thing, this looks awesome. And for another, it's less of a problem here because it's not so blatantly obvious that his shoulders are up here. Because unless you really have his arms swinging out, you don't really notice that that's where the joint is. It kind of all just seamlessly flows into his shoulder and goes down. Not what I consider much of a problem. In terms of coloring, it's interesting because the set is basically black, gold, and a little bit of gray. And then there are a few spots with like silver, and in the giant swords case, which we will get into, right there, it's like a metallic-y red color. But while the gold doesn't necessarily match the gold on the Dinobots, it's not quite the right shade, but then it's sort of similar in some places. It's weird. Like, here and here, it's a little bit closer. Obviously, it doesn't match the plastic on Snarl. Up there, it's kind of... But what really kind of helps to draw this together is the fact that this gold from the kit, you've got in the toes, you've got a little bit up in the thighs there, and then moving up, you've got some in the pelvis, some in the chest, then in the hands. So even though the Dinobots themselves don't necessarily share that same shade of gold, they do share the black, and that gold is sprinkled throughout the combined mode regardless, so it's not that much of a problem with things not being exactly matched up. The red is also pretty close too. I mean, yeah, that red in the midsection there, not quite the same red, but it's separated enough from everything else and the tone is close enough that I don't think it's a huge difference. The gray, it might be a little darker, but it's close enough that I don't think it really matters. And you also might notice that I have the Enigma of Combination, woo, in Volcanicus's chest. And in both the default mode and the fan-moded mode, I thought it looked really bad having that in there because it just pushes the Dino mode head for Grimlock out way too far in the chest. But the way that this chest gets bulked out with the set on, doing what Emgo was doing in his video by like putting it in there and kind of tilting it down a little bit, that actually works pretty darn well. Looking at him from the side, yeah, it sticks out, but it's not as pronounced because the bulkiness does come out and kind of cover it up a little bit. Bringing him closer to look at the details, you can see the feet have those really nice gold spiky toes, which I really like, and some nice molded detail in there. They're a little loose in some places, but like they're loose in ways that aren't really a problem, because like, yeah, the pivot is a little loose, but unless you've got him standing on one foot, it doesn't matter because he's got enough weight down there that it's just going to push those feet down to, you know, how they need to be. And they're not going to, like, he's not going to wiggle left or right. And the forward and backward motion are ratcheted, so don't have to worry about that. And you've got the thigh bulking out bits here, which I don't think they're super necessary in the grand scheme of things. I mean, they do help to add to the look, but if you lost these pieces or whatever, I don't think it'd be a huge loss. The hands, I am of two minds of. They're pretty cool looking with the spikes and everything like that, but I feel like the fingers are a little too... they're like a little too narrow, and this one is a little loose. I don't know. Fingers look a little spindly, but they do make decent clawed hands, so from most angles it doesn't really bother me. Then the waist area, you can see the new pelvis piece, which looks good. The thing that bugs me about this is it covers up the piece that I already had on there, that and it just covers it up. Like, you could just pop this right off. You pop it right off. Pop it right off. Come on. Why are you doing this? So, struggling to take that off. You can see the original pelvis still works okay, but it kind of loses some of the definition up there. The thing that sucks about covering it up is I've got the Reprolabels set on there, which looks really nice, so it's a little bit disappointing to lose that color, because this is a little bit plain in comparison, just color-wise. It does kind of help to keep that definition going. And on the back, he has a butt plate, which I also don't necessarily think is needed, but it's there. And it hampers the hip articulation, which I don't really care that much because I don't put my combiners in huge dynamic poses. But, you know, it's something to consider. Doesn't bother me personally, but I could see how it could bother other people because of these bits that kind of come out here. And I don't see why they couldn't have just found a way to have this, like, clip onto his butt and then clip onto the front bit here and not have these on the side. But whatever. I'm not the toy designer. And now moving on to that chest. That is some serious bulking up that happens there. I very much appreciate that. And yeah, the way this nestles around the Dino Mode head, it's really nice. I like the detail that's in there. These bits up here do a good job of covering up some mildly unsightly stuff going on there, and this is something that is a bit common with the fan mode stuff, that, you know, you get that kind of, you see more of the seams, and here it just serves to cover it up a little bit, which I very much appreciate. What I also very much appreciate is the fact that it includes this surprisingly cool looking backplate that kind of locks everything together and even gives him a little bit of a robotic spine. Like, that's really cool. Don't worry, I'll get to this. Lastly, for the combined mode specific stuff, there is, I guess I'll just turn him this way. There is the giant Honkin sword, and I do like the sword. It's very cool. The spray is a little bit wonky around the edges here, which doesn't bother me too terribly much. I think the shape of this is great. I love how the blade comes down and gets these like serrated segments to it that almost in a way look like a segmented shell, like either bug chitin or possibly like a nautilus shell or something like that. It's very cool. Very reminiscent of Grimlock's Fall of Cybertron sword too. And because it has the post on either side there, you can totally peg it onto his back, so that's cool. For whatever reason, I guess because I got the early release of the kit, I get an all-black version of this sword too, for some reason. I don't know. I guess I'm glad it's there. One thing that does kind of suck, though, and I think it's just a manufacturing issue on mine, is for whatever reason, the... It's going to be difficult to show off. I don't want to take it out of his hand right now. But one of the little bits here, you can kind of see there, it's bent in. It came out of the box like that, and that kind of sucks. But at the same time, I feel like, who's going to notice? Like, really? Realistically, who's going to notice that when you're looking at this thing in all of its majesty all put together? Because I'm willing to bet none of you did until I pointed that out. So yeah, this upgrade kit looks amazing. It's a little bit irritating to get on in some places, primarily in the chest. There's a bit of a technique to it. You kind of have to put the plate on first. Like, you have to disconnect the lower half of the body, put the plate on first, and then snap the body again in place, because like there are some little bits on the underside there that clip into place and hold everything very, very securely. But yeah, I love this set in the combined mode. One other thing to go over is some of the other accessories that come with this, and that includes swords for the Dinobots that are painted that same kind of metallic-y red color, and some new guns. And I think what's there looks good. A couple of problems. For one, the peg tolerances on a lot of these things are a little iffy, just a tad. The other problem is there is no real good way to store that stuff in the combined mode, and that actually does bug me a little bit, because I really prefer being able to have all of the bits and accessories and stuff attachable in some fashion in all modes. It's one of the things that bugs me about Unique Toys Ragnaros, the fact that the hands and feet don't like do anything. They're just kind of, you put them off to the side if you go into the individual robot or vehicle modes. And it's one of the things I love about Transform Missions Havoc, because the hands and feet for the combined mode turn into a decent chunk of the trailer for whatever they're calling Motormaster. Yeah, that kind of integration I really like. The fact that this does not have great integration like that is a little bit of a bummer, though I did find ways to store most of the weapons, including some of the original stuff. You may have noticed some of it as I was going around here, but starting from the bottom, turning this around, you You can see that I've actually got the original Power of the Primes rifles plugged into the back of Slug's arms, and his arms are configured a little bit differently, but it's because if I do it like that, when you're looking at them from the front, you can't tell that they're there, so I kind of like that. And of course, as I did in the original video for Volcanicus, I have the rifles plugged into Sludge's hands and kind of pointed up to just add a little bit more of an interest to the silhouette of the shoulder there. In this case, these are the new rifles that came with the upgrade kit, but they do work in the same fashion, so that's nice. Normally the guns that I have plugged into Slug are the ones that I have up there, but because I've got more, well, there you go. And then on the back, you can see I've got Grimlock's sword pegged in there, which is really more of a tiny little dagger in this in this mode, but still, it works. Also, there are little missile pods for Swoop, and those plug very nicely into the shoulders, and you can't really see them because of the the bulk, the sheer amount of mass in that torso, but still, they store there nicely, and it looks pretty good from the back. And lastly, there are the 3 swords that I have pegged into Swoop. I have the Swoop, the Power of the Prime sword that came with Swoop originally, pegged under his beak, as it can do. Unfortunately, none of the swords that come with this kit can do that, so I had to stick with that. And the other 2 swords I just have plugged into his hands, and then his wrists are bent slightly so that they kind of go up and out at a little bit of an angle. And I think they just add to the spikiness of his shoulder, and the wings kind of, they don't hide them, but they mask them a little bit, so it's not as overt, I don't think. And last, and in this case, yes, actually least, there's Grimlock's Rifle, which I just have tossed into the gap in his back there. There are 2 of these that come in the set. I only have one of them out, the other one I kept in the box. But yeah, you can just tuck it in there. It just goes right in there and just sits out of the way. And because of the bulk, again, you don't really even notice it's there, I don't think. So you could feasibly store the other one back in his other shoulder pocket. This guy is difficult to find spaces to hide things. Now you might be wondering, why don't I do things like, say, tuck any of the weapons into his, like, the sides of Sludge there, or into the pegs on Snarl or Slug? Well, that's because, regrettably, the new weapons, they don't fit. They just don't fit. The pegs aren't wide enough. Like the swords, all of the swords have pegs on the sides. They do not fit in any of these. Like, they'll peg in and then just immediately fall out. They're just not thick enough. And that's really frustrating. Conversely, the handles are a little bit too thick. So it's this weird kind of back and forth that I'm not super sold on. Anyway, since this is a proper figure study after a fashion, let's move the upgraded Volcanicus off to the side and do a couple of quick size comparisons. So here he is with Combiner Wars Victorion with the perfect effect, in this case Bruticus intended hands and feet. And you might recall the default Volcanicus and the fan-moded one, the one that uses just the regular Power of the Prime stuff, is pretty much head-to-head with Victorion. So now that he's got the giant stompy feats, he is noticeably a bit taller and way bulkier in the torso and shoulders. So it definitely gives him the impression, let me pull back just a little bit more here, it gives him the impression of being much bigger than than he originally was. And because, of course, here he is with a Power of the Primes Deluxe. Let's pull this back a bit so you can actually see them there. And yeah, I mean, he's a combiner, so of course he's huge. Also, you'll notice there's Slash down there. and regrettably slash just I can't figure out a way to incorporate her into this combination with all the upgrades. There's no good place to peg her on or get her to hang on for dear life. I was thinking maybe I could get her to bulk out the forearm portion of Swoop there, but I just can't figure out a way to attach her for something like that, so unfortunately, currently she's just sitting off to the side. And lastly, before jumping into the individual robot mode, so I can show off the accessory portion of this, which I hate, I should also point out and make mention of the fact that this guy does in fact have Reprolabels on him. He has the full set of Toy Hacks Reprolabels for the Dinobots in various places, and it's pretty much as with Unite Warriors Devastator, where the little touches of color that the sticker sets add, like, you know, the silver and red details and the tips of Swoop's wings, the little gold bits on what are the robot mode feet there, these little bits on Sludge, and there's some stuff down here on Slug and Snarl, with like little details on the sides and the bits there along the frill there. I'll include a link to the video where I go over the Reprolabels down below, but yeah, it's as with Unite Warriors Devastator, it's like a lot of little details that you don't necessarily notice overtly, but they add more little detail-y bits and colors and texture to break things up a little bit more throughout, and I really, really like it. It makes this seem just a little bit more, I don't want to say real, because it's a giant robot made up of giant robot dinosaurs, but you know what I mean. Also, I love this detail in Grimlock, the little stickers for the engine bits of his shoulders, whatever you want to call them, up in there. And yeah, I think it looks great here too, just that little bit of red in that torso. Very cool. As I said, love this in the combine mode. Not so much with the robots though. And here we have the Transform Dreamwave upgrade kit for the individual Dinobots. And okay, where to begin with why I hate this thing as an accessory set. As I said, I think it's great. It's fantastic for the combine mode, and I'm very happy I got it for the combine mode. But I hate the way it works as an accessory set for the individual Dinobots. I guess the first thing to start with is the fact that not everything is actually represented here. For one thing, there's not really any good place to put the giant sword, which you can see in a little bit better detail now that it's not attached to a giant combiner. And there you can see the that bent bit on the end there. That's kind of unfortunate. Yeah, there's no really good place for this. There's nowhere for it to go. And given my distaste for having extra bits off to the side when I transform things... Anyway, next, let's talk about those hands and feet. Swoop is currently holding one of the hands as a gun, and this is something that bothers me immensely. As kind of by the numbers as the perfect effect sets are when it comes to the hands transforming into guns, like they all pretty much do it the same way, these don't do it well at all. These things are just messy and annoying and floppy. So, I'm just going to show that off real quick. You rotate the thumb around. You split the hand down the middle. You split it down the middle. Rotate it in. And then the thumb kind of curls down there. Handle comes down. And then these bits hinge backwards. And just kind of sit back there, and then the four fingers become the blaster, so to speak. 1, this is super ugly. 2, when viewed from a certain angle, it's super inappropriate. 3, it's really kind of floppy, like nothing really pegs into place. It's really easy for the, like, this hinge is relatively strong, but like these wiggle really easily. They don't actually seem to peg in anywhere, and it's just a mess. And like these, like one of these fingers is a little loose, so that kind of doesn't want to stay up really, and it's really easy to bump these things down. You can have this like weird looking gun barrel thing. It's such a terrible, terrible idea for transforming this into a gun. Yeah, all the perfect effects sets do something similar, but they do it better. They do it so much better. Also, this peg, too thick. It does not fit well into any of the robot's hands. And on top of that, this swings out really easily, especially the one in Swoops. So when you try to peg it in, that peg kind of wants to swing out, and it's... And because everything doesn't really sit together well, it just kind of wants to fall apart in your hands while you're trying to peg it in, and it's just... It sucks. I hate it. As a gun, it is terrible. While I've got Slug in my hands, let's talk about those other shotguns that these guys come with, that the set comes with. Now, these are the default Power the Primes guns, and these peg in. No problem. Everything's cool. I'll talk about this in a second. Everything's cool. However, the problem with these guns, while they look nice, and I guess you could say they're not as gappy as the Power of the Primes guns, Slug and Slug and Sludge are the ones that come with these shotgun things regularly, like these versions. So, you know, I assume those are the guys who are meant to hold these guns. I could be wrong, but that's my assumption because these guns are very similar to these guns, so I feel like, okay, these are meant to replace those. Problem is, these have this little bit coming off the end, and both Slug and Sludge have these dino feet sticking up there, so you can't plug them in because of that. You can kind of plug them in like this, but then they can't hold the gun straight. It's really frustrating, which is why I've still got these guns out, because that's the only way for them to hold a gun. Because the handguns are too tight, and these don't fit. Now, let's take a look at Swoop for a brief change of pace. You'll notice he is holding his gun, his handgun, but just barely. Like, it would not take... Yeah. It doesn't peg in all the way because it's too tight, and it's, again, a mess. It gets all pushed out of whack, and it's just terrible. As a gun, those are terrible. On top of that, there are the missile pods, which are supposed to peg in via these little flat tabs here. Not these, which, you know, fine, whatever. According to the instructions, they're supposed to peg in either here or here. Good freaking luck getting that to happen. I have tried pushing really hard, supporting it at like both ends, and it just will not work. Like, I watched Emgo's video, he said that eventually it'll go, it's really tight. But like on mine, it's really tight, but it's so tight that it just pushes it right back out. It will not stay in. So the only way that I've found to be able to get these to plug in, and it's not 100% of a given, sometimes they still fall out, is to plug them into these larger ports on the back. And that kind of works sometimes, sort of. And I mean, they're in there, but yeah, it's such a pain, and you can only really plug them in that one spot. I'm not a fan. Kind of wishing that I did like the non-F thing for those, but you know, they come with the set, so that's that. Okay, Swoop. Back you go. Now, for the feet. The feet do give you options. And I will say I also ran into an issue with these when I first got them out of the box, and I'll tell you what to look for after I've gone over some of this stuff. But these actually contain 3 guns and a shield. Seems completely unnecessary, but fine. And I'll get into why that bothers me also in a minute. But you just kind of unclip it from here. It's a little thing that hooks in on the inside of this gold bit and also hooks around those silver bits. So just kind of pull up and out. And then you can wiggle to pull out this mass of silver. And this pops off. And you're left with this that can't really go anywhere. It may be able to peg in somewhere along here. I don't know, and I don't really care to check. Now this is supposed to be a shield. Problem is, these bits don't really lock in. And this only really works as like an arm peg, but it's way too thick. It does not work well as an arm peg. Like, I've tried it on all the Dinobots, but just demoing it on Slug, you can see it's like, it's too thick. It was hard enough getting this thing to plug into the foot mode, but it's too thick to plug in, so it's a failure as a shield in that regard. And I thought maybe if you like push these up, because they're on like a little bit of a slider, if you push these up, then you can like swing them in to make a shield like that, and that sort of works as a smaller shield, but you still run into the problem with the peg. So that's a failure. Then these, you get 3 different guns. These all unplug from the center mass, and you get one rifle with a peg kind of going further back, another rifle with a peg that's a little bit further forward, so you can see how those kind of work out there. And then you get a pistol. And the paint is super uneven and not really applied well on any of them. But it's fine because I don't really care that much, really. And you can see how these go in there. But the reason I hate these is because it's 3 guns per foot. That's 6 guns. Just the feet have more guns than there are Dinobots that make up this combiner. And they already have weapons. Even if you take away the power of the Prime stuff that they come with, they've all got like rifles and swords and shields and stuff. So this is just unnecessarily excessive, and it gets in the way. I have to like peg them onto the backs and stuff like that, and it just doesn't look good. Especially when you consider the fact that these guns are, for one thing, ugly and hollow on one side, but on the other, these pegs aren't symmetrical, so if you try to plug 2 from like the same foot in the back, it does not work because one will end up sitting higher than the other because of where these pegs are. Now, looking at the other foot, I'm going to go over the problem that I had initially real quick, and that's that these feet did not sit well when I first got them. They kind of rocked a little bit, and the reason that seems to have been is because this mass of guns was not pushed in far enough. It was kind of sticking out just a little bit, and that kind of off-centered this a bit. So if you get this and you don't intend to transform it or anything like that, you just want to use it for your combiner, just make sure that this is pushed in all the way to make it nice and flat and stable. But yeah, I don't like that this creates so many needless accessories, many of which are useless. Oh, but I'm not done. So you can see the butt plate makes a tiny shield, and it's fine. It's not a great looking shield, but it's fine. It's inoffensive. Snarl has he has the thigh plates, the thigh covers that come together to make a shield, and that's fine. I have a bit of an issue with the fact that these flappy bits don't want to stay down all the way. They keep popping up like that, and there's really nothing I can do to keep them down. So that's a little bit unsightly. Then there's the fact that Snarl's wrist isn't strong enough to support the weight of this as a shield, so it keeps wanting to bend in with little prompting. But, you know, it's fine. Ultimately, it works, and someone else could hold it, so I'm not that mad about this. The sword, and a lot of them have this problem, does not account for the lip there. So he can't hold it all the way down. You have to turn it so that it's like facing this way, and that's just dumb. So, yeah. And then you've got one of the only things that this thing actually, that actually peg in well, and that's these bits that kind of cover up that unsightly combiner mode gap in the shoulders. These plug into Snarl's Dino Hips / Robot Mode shoulders and give him some mounted artillery, and that's fine. The only thing that bums me out about these is because of where they sit, you can't push the tail thing in all the way, which is not a huge deal, and you don't have to use them, but it's a thing. It's a thing to consider. And for Sludge, he has the same issue as Slug. You can see he's got the dino toes facing up, so he totally can't hold those rifles. And I tried plugging in those guns back here, but that's where I ran into the problem where they don't really line up because the pegs are different, but then both feet are the same, so both left rifles that come out of the feet have the peg in the same spot, so I can't, swap between them either. It's just irritating. Though I will be fair to admit this, I did find that plugging the pistols into the chest actually kind of works as a little bit of armor decoration or something. So take those off and grab the wrong thing. Let's take those off and take the little pistol, and you can plug that in there, and it kind of sort of conforms to the body there and just adds a little bit of silvery detail to the chest. So that's a thing you can do if you want. It's not terrible, but yeah, it's disappointing. And lastly, we come to Grimlock. And Grimlock fares okay. It's cool that he gets his sword. It's cool that he gets his rifle. I'm not as super into him needing to have the same accessories that his original toy came with, or he had in the cartoon or whatever, as other people are, but it's nice that it's there. The issue that I have with his sword is, you can see it's got that kind of edge to it that bumps into his wrist, and his wrist can't angle down because of the way he transforms, so it's never going to sit in his hand properly unless you turn it sideways, and that's not how you hold a sword. So there's that. Then there's this thing, the shield mass. And it doesn't look terrible. It's a little busy, and if you turn it, it does very much look like a combiner torso. But, it's fine in that regard. However, the peg that's connecting it to his arm is super loose, so it does not take much for that to happen. So you kind of have to angle him a certain way to make sure that gravity works with you, and that's really annoying. Then there's the fact that because this thing is so loose, it actually rattles around in the combine mode, and it always makes me paranoid thinking that something's broken. So I'm probably, when I go to put this guy back into combine mode, I'm just gonna pop this. There we go. Come on, off you go. There we go. Yeah, just pop that out and never have to think about it again. That's going to sit in the box for all eternity. And then he's got his rifle, which is cool. It's Grimlock's Rifle, and this actually doesn't have any excess on the back there, so it can sit in his hand fully. Thank goodness. For once, that's one out of how many weapons? And then for the Dino Modes, just picture that again, but with dinosaurs instead of robots with vaguely dinosaur-shaped bits on them. I'm sorry, I normally am not super negative about the stuff that I cover on the channel, mostly because I'm enthusiastic about the stuff that I get, because I want this stuff and usually look into it before I get it, so I tend to not just get something just to get it and end up disappointed. Sometimes that does happen, but if this, as it is, were like an accessory set for the Dinobots, I would be really mad that I spent money on this, especially how much money this goes for. That's ridiculous. As I said at the beginning of the video, and before I started talking about this, I think if you're getting this set for the combine mode, which I think we all will be, anyone who gets it, I mean, there might be people who don't, but I'd be shocked. But if you're getting this for the combine mode, it is wonderful for the combine mode. It does have some issues with things not pegging in properly and there not being any real good place to store the weapons, but overall, the combine mode with these accessories is fantastic, and it looks so good, and in my opinion, looks way better than Perfect Effects offering. That being said, I imagine Perfect Effects offering is a lot less horrible when viewed as an accessory set. Anyway, that is enough ranting and raving. I'm tired and my throat's dry. So, that has been my look at the Transform Dreamwave upgrade kit for Power of the Primes, Volcanicus, and by extension the Dinobots. What do you all think? If you were to get this set for yourself, would you even bother trying it out like this? Would it be like a passing curiosity, or is this something you would actually want to be able to display them as in some instances? Because I know sometimes I like to change things up too, you know, switch from combine mode to individual bot mode, but I'm not a fan of this. In terms of Transform Dreamwave versus Perfect Effect, what's your preference? Because, I mean, you know what mine is. And what do you all think of the idea of maybe Frankensteining a couple of sets together? Like, instead of using the hands and feet that come with the Transform Dreamwave kit, using the Perfect Effect hands and feet instead, or using the Transform Dreamwave hands and feet and then using the Perfect Effect torso and pelvis and stuff. Kind of curious how that would look, actually. I'm not going to spend the extra money to test it out, but I am curious. But whatever your thoughts, feel free to comment down below. I always enjoy hearing from you all. And while you're at it, also feel free to like or subscribe. Any of those things would make me a happy Rob. Really, anything that takes my mind off of this right here would make me a happy Rob. And remember, art is more than meets the eye.